directors of the Institute, Director General Rom, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that Airbus is here today for this opportunity that the Institute has given me to bond with the Israeli aviation industries. On a professional level, we are very honored. On a personal level, I consider this a privilege addressing this assembly today. And my presentation continues in much of the themes that have been discussed today already. We've seen that, thank you. We've seen that regulation shapes markets, and we've seen that an absence of regulation or liberalization has the ability to shape markets too. So this may sound confusing, and what will follow in the next 28 minutes and 47 seconds will be the Airbus guide for the perplexed. Our view, we have the privilege of working with the world's airlines, so that gives us very privileged contacts. That gives us an opportunity to build a global view of where aviation is going, and that is what I wish to share with you today. Because liberalization has the proven power to reshape air travel markets, and Airbus is responsive to these markets, so liberalization and the associated growth has influenced the Airbus product line, as it has with other manufacturers, and it has shaped our development choices for our airplanes. Because Airbus lives by meeting customers' needs and requirements, and where possible, exceeding their expectations. And Airbus has flourished in markets that have witnessed liberalization and growth, where comfort differentiation and, above all, low costs are important to the airlines. And although Airbus is today a truly global company, we're relatively new to Israel. We proudly work with Israel, and we will proudly work with Arkia, who will double the Airbus presence in 2018. But Airbus also has another venture in Israel. It has a joint venture with Israeli Aircraft Industries on a very innovative project called Tagubot, which is an aircraft tractor controlled by the pilot from the cockpit. So, as Airbus is relatively new to Israel, just a line about each member of our aircraft family, which ranges from the smallest 100-seater, which is part of the A320 family. That's the A318, 19, A320, and A321. And the A320 family is the reference single-aisle aircraft amongst low-cost airlines worldwide. It offers the widest cabin in its class, and is also suited to the premium product as much as those seeking the lowest costs. The A330, available in two sizes to cover the 200 to 250 seat market, 200 to 350 seat market, is a medium to long range wide body that offers the best economic performance of any wide body in service today. And it is a partner to the A350, the new A350, which is Airbus's composite long range wide body aircraft, which is available in three sizes to cover, in round figures, 250 to 400 seats. And then, top of the tree in all senses of the word, top of the chart, the A380, which over the last 5 years has proven to be the natural successor to the 747. It guarantees the lowest cost and unmatched passenger appeal in the large aircraft market. Over 80 A380s are now in service with 9 airlines worldwide. The A380 truly is the new queen of the skies and already carries 1.25 million passengers a month and carries 30% of all Europe to Asia traffic. But please do not consider these aircraft as separate families. They are one jetliner family, as commonality, as important it is to airlines, is important to the manufacturers as well. So, as I said, Airbus is a truly global company. It's not French, not even European, although we're headquartered in the south of France, in Toulouse. Our working language is English. I have colleagues from over 100 different countries speaking over 20 different languages. And from small beginnings just 40 years ago, Airbus's industrial footprint now produces between 2 and 3 aircraft a day. We have a global infrastructure supporting over 7,000 aeroplanes in service in the colors of over 350 airlines. Behind that is a network of spare centers and training centers, and we have a worldwide partnership with CAE, which ensures the 85,000 Airbus qualified pilots remain current, and the current demand for 9,500 new pilots per year can be met. This year, Airbus will deliver, again, nearly 600 aeroplanes from our final assembly lines in France, Germany, and China. And from 2016, we'll be delivering aeroplanes from Airbus in the United States, from Alabama. And the announcement a couple of months ago of an Airbus assembly line in Mobile, Alabama, is a mind-changing announcement that will change America's perception of Airbus. Because unknown to most Americans, every year Airbus spends just under half its procurement budget, that's around $12 billion, with over 400 American-based suppliers. So no matter where it assembles its aircraft, every Airbus is the product of a highly efficient cooperation across the company's global supply chain and manufacturing chain, and decades of innovation in the air transport sector. And regarding the quantity of aircraft produced, the industry over the last 5 years has been producing record numbers of aeroplanes. As you can see from the chart, the Airbus production model, and Airbus is in blue in here, is one of a steady ramp-up. It's a steady ramp-up because we know the big changes in production is expensive and puts increased pressure on staff and the supply chain. This means that we have to work very closely with the airlines in the good times and obviously in the bad times as well. And really to follow on from some of the previous speakers, the market is one of growth. Our aircraft are being delivered into a dynamic, ever-changing airline landscape with increasing liberalization, where only the most modern products can offer the lowest cost, highest versatility, and therefore the lowest risk and highest return to airlines. Today alone, about 8.2 million passengers will fly. That's more than the population of Israel. That's the equivalent to the population of New York. And those passengers will fly on 15,500 commercial airplanes, which fly around 80,000 flights daily. And quite remarkably, these figures continue to grow. These figures continue to grow at the rate of air traffic doubling every 15 years. And despite the current and many challenges to global aviation, traffic is growing. It is fully recovered from 9/11/2001. It has grown over the last decade at about 5% a year. This means that since the 1970s, consistently, and there's been challenges and ups and downs, but the trend is clear. Air traffic doubles every 15 years. And if we look to the future, air travel will remain a growth market. Airbus, and it's an industry consensus, considers that over the next 20 years, traffic will grow annually at just under 5% a year. So moving on to the airlines. How to cope with growth, because growth is an opportunity and growth is a threat. This chart starts with 3 airlines. They have 25%, 35%, and 40% market share each. And this is just simple mathematics, this chart. Airline A, so the leader in 2011, has a market share of 40%, but has a growth strategy of 0. The smaller competitors have a growth strategy of 2.5. Let's see, coping with 5% growth in traffic, how these airlines fare. Those build it up. By the end of the 20-year period, the airline that once dominated is now has moved to the smallest airline within the category. It takes less than 10 years for that airline to go from leader to follower in that market. So to put it simply, for airlines, no growth is a no-go strategy. And we see that with the market focus. And here I've just taken the wide-body section covering 200 to 300 seaters. we have the situation in 2007 and the situation today in 2012. Here we have the 250-seaters. It looks like airplanes have disappeared. In fact, they haven't disappeared. What airlines are doing, and it doesn't matter which brand of manufacturer they're turning to, we can see the effect on the 300-seater category. Airlines that are originally planned to buy 250-seaters for this period have, en masse, moved up to the 300-seaters. So you can see that there is growth in there, and airlines are planning for that growth. And this is wide bodies. If I had a chart covering the single aisles as well, talking just from the Airbus point of view, this year alone, we've had 124 contract changes with airlines, where airlines had purchased the smaller members of the family, the A318, the A319, and A320, and moved them up into the A321 category. So basically moving up from 130 to 150 seats into a category much nearer to 200 seats. So airlines are planning for growth. The other way airlines are planning for growth is buying more and more airplanes. This is the backlog of both manufacturers. In round figures, on order today, doesn't matter which manufacturer, yet to be delivered, there are 8,500 airplanes. That's the way it lays out, about 7 years production for Airbus, 7 years production for Boeing. And you can see the mass of the market is in the single aisle area with the A320s and 737s, but there is also significant money put in by airlines into the wide body categories, the longer range, higher capacity A330, A350, and the 777s and 787s on the other side. And of course, right at the bottom, we have the largest airplanes with Airbus on order today, 173 A380s yet to be delivered. So what will these airplanes do? They will fly more people with more wealth to bigger cities. They will serve growing middle classes around the world. They will stimulate tourism, trade, and internationalization. And importantly, they will be able to serve more routes and more destinations because of the liberalization of air markets. But looking at these figures, it's not just growth. About 35% of these airplanes will replace older, less efficient, less eco-efficient airplanes. And these 8,500 airplanes are just the first of 27,500 airplanes that the airlines of the world will need over the next 20 years. So Airbus works with airlines, and Airbus forecasts industry growth on a global level, and Airbus has the ability to extract from its global forecasts, local forecasts. I'm glad to say we're completely in line, and there was no pre-conversation on this with the Airports Authority, that the Airbus forecast for the next 20 years for growth in traffic to and from Israel, in round figures, is 4%. So Israel, in turn, is going to benefit from its share of passenger growth. There is perhaps one figure which is misleading on this chart and needs a little bit of explanation. The growth figure for Europe is 2.7%. Remember, that's a 20-year figure. In the next 10 years, based on what we've already seen on low-cost carriers and growing liberalization and the potential of open skies here in Israel with the EU, Airbus forecasts over the next 10 years 5% growth in the European market. But as it is already a relatively mature market, the longer-term growth is slower. So, turning even closer to the Israeli market, now I have to be very clear on this chart. This is not an Airbus sales forecast for Israeli carriers. That statement will help me explain exactly what it is, although it could be a forecast on two conditions. Condition number one, Israeli carriers only buy Airbus. Probably not a good idea for us to plan on that. Condition number two, Israeli carriers dominate 100% of the Israeli market. It's probably not a good idea for you to plan on that either. So the point here, this is a global market view of the requirement to cover passengers that wish to travel to and from Israel. So the Airbus view is that in 20 years' time, the equivalent of 165 aeroplanes, a split of roughly 2/3 for the single aisles, 1/3 for the twin aisles, and a few over 450 seats. this is the amount of airplanes that will be required. So if we assume that Israeli airlines maintain their market shares, we would forecast around 80 aircraft based here in Israel. And we would expect in 20 years' time only the most recently delivered airplanes and those that are on order today to be in service. So much of those 80 is based on replacement rather than growth. And on that topic, I think the emphasis of the slide is clear. When we compare the average age of the Israeli fleet with those of some of its competitors and potential competitors, we first of all don't see too much difference with the legacy carriers, but I wish to point out that both Air France and British Airways already have placed orders recently for the rejuvenation of their fleet. And then perhaps even more importantly, if we look at EasyJet at 4 years as their average fleet age, EasyJet continuously taking new Airbuses literally on a weekly basis. EasyJet is currently putting into the market and finding homes for their 8-year-old A319s. So EasyJet is in a constant revolution and rejuvenation of its fleet. And this underlines one thing: gone are the days when engineers and pilots drove fleet evaluations. Today's fleet evaluations are driven by economics, not solely economics, but this is the driving factor. And age is important because we can talk about maintenance costs, we can talk about fuel burner retention, we can also talk about the continual improvement of the airliners themselves that are coming out from the manufacturing lines around the world. Because as manufacturers, we are under great pressure from the airlines to continually allow them to grow, and we do that by offering them the most efficient aircraft, but also those that can cover their network more efficiently, allowing them to cover more destinations. Because for the fast-growing airlines, if they do not grow, they die. And airlines are becoming more efficient because of this. So the pressure is paying dividends as airlines are finding new ways to cut costs. And despite the doubling of the fuel price over recent years, the cost of moving one passenger 1 kilometer has been pretty stable. And the industry has clearly adapted to the higher fuel prices it faces today. There have been casualties, but the speed in which other airlines have soaked up demand is quite astonishing. And the drive for fuel efficiency is almost as old as the jet age itself. But what is new is that airlines keep finding ways to lower their costs. And this is a trend that Israeli carriers must follow. Because when we look at historical fact, we see that in Israel, it's not just a case of lying back and enjoying steady growth. There's already a fight going on, and whilst traffic has been growing by about 22% over the last decade, and despite initially holding a good market share, Israeli carriers have not fully benefited from the good times of recent years. And it is a challenging environment, and this is clearly understood. You have traffic dominated in two very different environments, that of Europe and that of the United States. You have open skies potentially coming to Israel. You have a scheduling issue that allows Israel to be seen almost as a bonus by many European airlines, because while most of their fleets are asleep, there's just enough time to do a round trip to Ben Gurion. And finally, seasonality. There is big seasonality in European and American traffic. So it's an incredible but very honorable challenge to be an Israeli airline. But it's the manufacturer's role to understand that. And we're very close to our customers, and we place enormous importance on understanding the needs and requirements at a global and a customized level. Every airline is a customized case. Every airline has a desire and hopefully the will to be unique in what it provides to the customers. And that's why you find Airbuses at London City, in Bhutan, in other places in the Himalayas, and even here in this photo in the Antarctic. And the reason why I show this is it allows me to mention something else. This is an A319 operating to the Antarctic ice runway near the McMurdo station. But it allows me to say an industry given which should never be overlooked. And I haven't mentioned it so far, the other speakers have, and that is growth has to be sustainable. We have to be able to do more with less. But Israeli carriers are in a difficult position. They are not in a level playing field with foreign carriers. And many of the challenges Israeli airlines face today would normally be met by standard operating procedures or fleet organization. in foreign airlines. For Israeli airlines, it is far more difficult. But if we look at the inherently difficult situation of your carriers, the key word is obviously security. Security itself lowers utilization. That, of course, affects costs. It means new routes are perhaps slow and difficult to open. It means it's difficult to create partnerships. On the other hand, the foreign carriers, they do not have these constraints. It allows them to have lower costs. It allows them to get support from alliances and to play big roles in alliances as well. And therefore, there is this fair differentiation between an Israeli airline offering a service and a foreign airline. But this means that Israeli carriers have structural obstacles they must overcome to be competitive. But there is an upside, because branding cannot just be based on fares. Israeli carriers have something very special, very specific, and this has to be turned into a strength in today's market. I'll quickly go through these. A lot of studies have been done with open skies over the years. Here's just one on the Ukraine. The point of the Ukraine market is quite simple. It's a good story. It's a happy story. It turns out well for the Ukraine in terms of number of passengers, and it works out well after a period of consolidation for the Ukraine airlines. The Tasman, the New Zealand to Australia route is also something which has seen tremendous movement over the years, and it's perhaps one of the more complex studies that can be looked at. But again, there's some very positive stories that come out of it, and Air New Zealand, because of its willingness to change, is one of the winners of that Open Skies agreement. So as I've said, economics drives today the demand for aeroplanes. So here's just a very visual example, there's many others, that show what non-stop innovation is. This A320 is different from any A320 you'll see arriving at Ben Gurion today. It has new winglets, which we call sharklets. They offer 4% lower fuel burn than the original A320 wingtip. And this airplane will enter into service next month. But there are also improvements that you don't see because they're on the inside. They're designed to improve comfort, improve cost, improve reliability, improve seating. We've just launched a new lavatory arrangement which allows even more seats to be put into the aeroplane. And all these changes reflect the world our customers live in. And these changes don't come cheap. Improving what is already a great airplane costs AIRBUS, well, I shouldn't say cost because it's an investment. The investment on an annual basis is $300 million. I'll quickly skip over this chart. My point here is simply that the manufacturers are not alone in this. The engine manufacturers are not standing still either. Whilst we, the manufacturer, can do a few things to save 1% or 3% or 4% here, the big changes in savings are often engine technology driven. So I mentioned the A320, I could say exactly the same about larger airplanes as well. The A330 of today is not the A330 of yesterday. There's been continual investment, about $150 million a year by Airbus in keeping the A330 young, profitable, modern. Just to go through the evolution of that. As Mike mentioned earlier, one of the things is reliability, profitability of the twin engines and the ability to replace multiple engine airplanes to bring twin engine economics to far longer routes. We've done that through ETOPS, we've done that by upgrades in systems, we've done that through upgrades in takeoff weight. So the A330 of today is not the A330 tomorrow, and just to give you an idea what that means in terms of usefulness to an airline. I know range circles around Tel Aviv don't actually mean much, but just to give you an idea, a 1994 A330 would have flown, in round figures, 4,000 nautical miles. It would have been, out of Tel Aviv, a great airplane for Europe. Today, the airplane that looks the same from the outside is a transatlantic airplane. It's an airplane to serve Johannesburg. It's an airplane to go into the Far East. It looks the same, but offers to the airline far greater value. And that is something that allows the airlines to grow. But it's one thing improving current products, and it's something that all manufacturers do, and it's essential to the way we work. But every so often there is a combination of technologies which allows a leap to be made, a real next step. Roughly speaking, and by observation, when a new aircraft program can deliver 15 to 20% operating economies over the previous, or the actual model at that time, the manufacturers invest. And that's what the A330 does, sorry, the A350 does. It offers a leap in operating economics over the previous generation of airplanes. But I also want to mention size at this time, because whilst the A330, the largest A330 in round figures is a 300-seater, it's around the size of the smallest A350. So to accommodate growth, the twin-engine long-range airplane from Airbus is getting bigger. And that's thanks to the A350, which in its largest module is around a 400-seater. But when we talk about getting bigger, there is nothing bigger, obviously, than the A380 today. And it is the airplane which offered a 20% leap over the previous generation of airplanes. But the main fundamental logic behind the A380 is it is part of the bigger picture allowing the industry to grow. Because in context of growth, the A380 allows sustainable growth. Whether we're talking about emissions, noise, or congestions, flying a larger airplane to the same place with more passengers not only works for the economics of the operation, it works for the sustainability in the long term of aviation. If you didn't know, I'll quickly just say that the A380, from the passenger's point of view, is an amazing airplane. That's the feedback we have from the market. And the worries that there were put around by some people 10 years ago about how will the world accept such a large airplane, these have been put aside. In fact, the A380 is a passenger magnet. People go out their way to fly on the A380. So again, we've proven, and passengers have proven it by paying additional money to fly on an A380 compared to another airplane, that bigger airplanes work for the aviation industry. The last thing the manufacturer can do to help the industry efficiency is to build commonality in, because pilots are an essential, highly skilled part of the airline operation, but pilots cost money, and therefore anything a manufacturer can do to get more efficiency out of the pool of pilots is a way forward for the aviation industry. It not only cuts costs, it improves the operating patterns of the airlines and of the pilots themselves. I'll sum up with some words of science. I think this has been alluded to by a few people this morning. The famous quote from Charles Darwin, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives, it is the one that is most adaptable to change." And I invited Mr. Darwin to this presentation because liberalization increases competition, and the competition to survive. And through liberalization, we've seen that it is an opportunity for all airlines to extend their reach, an opportunity to fight for existing traffic and stimulate new traffic. In turn, this affects market structure and operating patterns, and it has put pressure on us, the manufacturers, to produce ever more efficient flying machines, flying further for less. And as we heard in the previous presentation, liberalization has allowed low-cost carriers to exist, and in many cases to flourish. And the low-cost carriers have changed this industry, and whatever came before has had to adapt to survive. And even the biggest have adapted, and there has been consolidation, and there have been many traditional carriers that have adopted parts of the LCC, the low-cost carrier model. And all airlines, no matter where they are in the world today, are adapting to these new realities of liberalization and traffic growth. And the same forces will now be on the Israeli carriers to reinvent themselves, because they're going to be under pressure that they have never seen before. For those that prefer words of wisdom rather than words of science, quote from Rambam: "The physician should not treat the disease, but the patient who is suffering from it." It's a very different quotation, but the theme is one that really points the way forward. Israeli carriers should not be afraid of the future. Israeli carriers should face it by being ready to adapt, by being ready to make the changes necessary. Many carriers have learned from low-cost carriers, adapting some of their philosophies to the way they wish to work, helping them become better at what they already do, and help them to remain loyal also to their high-value passengers. Low-cost carriers themselves are also adapting. They're becoming new-age airlines, or hybrids, as we often hear, taking the best of low-cost together with a selection of services that suit their market needs. In fact, nothing today is sacred apart from safety. So let's combine Darwin's science and Ramban's wisdom. In the face of liberalization and growth, carriers must leave fear and procrastination behind them. They must accept to reinvent themselves with new products, new branding, rejuvenation, developing the network, and cutting costs, or they will simply be swallowed by new entrants. So, last slide. It's now 2050. We have the freedom to dream. Technology can do anything, but it can't do everything. And Airbus engineers are consistently encouraged to think widely and widely to come up with disruptive ideas that will assist our industry meeting 2050 environmental targets that the company has signed up to. And these and other tough environmental decisions will only be met by a combination of investment in smarter aircraft design and optimizing the environment in which the airplane fly. This is why our latest Future by Airbus Smarter Skies concept, and I just encourage you to go and look on the internet, just type Future by Airbus. These concepts focus not just on what we fly, but how we fly in 2050 and beyond. And bear in mind, as other speakers have said today, air transport moves over 3 billion passengers and 35% of the world's trade in value every year. And impressively, while air traffic has grown by over 50% in the last decade, the demand for fuel from aviation has remained pretty flat. So we are already meeting seamlessly impossible targets. But the next step change will not come easy. Remember, Neil Armstrong went to the moon with the technology that's in our mobile phones of today. So working on what we've already achieved is a fantastic base to go forward. And there is a hidden message in this slide. Now, the department at Airbus that works on the concept plane has this code. We all have codes and siglums in our companies, and it's EIAI. Now, if you look at it and you want to believe that that says El Al, it does say El Al. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address